Hello, dear SCAN friends. This is for the women of the climate movement and for everyone brave enough to stand here now while the world is being pushed to the brink. Of all the work we've ever done, dear friends, this is the fight that decides everything. Thank you for refusing silence. Thank you for refusing despair. Thank you for choosing action for the land, the water, and the children who will live with the consequences of what happens next. We know the pressure, we feel the threat, and still we keep organizing and building and acting. Across the world, women are stepping into climate leadership, and this leadership is not a bonus, it is essential. And that's because sexism and climate backlash rise together. Because hatred for women, climate denial, and attacks on climate policy are part of the same system. Same interests, same playbook, same goal. To stop change by dividing us. If they split us, they survive. If we stand together, they lose. But we are not starting from zero. We stand on the shoulders of suffragists, of feminists, of civil rights fighters, Indigenous land defenders, peace movements, queer liberation, trade unionists who shut systems down and forced history to bend. None of these movements asked politely. They disrupted, they resisted, they took risks, they used collective direct action, and they changed the story of who we are as humans. The women's movement remains the most powerful social revolution of our time, and once again, it's training us for what comes next, but we didn't know it then. The women's movement was sharpening us, sharpening our teeth, hardening our resolve, teaching us how to fight when the stakes are life and death, because that's where we are now. So to the climate women and the allies here today, thank you for showing up. Thank you for staying so strong and creative. Thank you for refusing to back down. Your legacy will not end here. It will drive movements still rising, especially the migrant and refugee movement. This is starting to a chant. What rises with climate backlash? Sexism. What rises with sexism? Denial. What do they want? Division. And what do we choose? Solidarity. This terrific video by Martha Davis of Culture and Innovative Tactics Committee, which is sponsoring this project, made this video of this year's International Women's Day demonstration on March the 8th.
So here's an interesting and important fact. According to Brookings Institute, UN Women, and Science Direct, a 10% increase of women in Parliament results in a 2.4 decrease in emissions per capita.
So here we are. Women represent almost 70% of SCAN's membership. We are taking on full responsibility in a situation that none of us is prepared for. A life and death struggle to offset the worst of a climate catastrophe. Structural barriers have historically prevented the widespread recognition and utilization of our skills. Working together on SCAN helps the environmental movement, but it also makes our lives better.
We need to work together. It's time to make things happen. We need climate action.
So what does the women's movement bring to the climate movement? The climate movement would not exist in its present form without the millions of highly skillful, knowledgeable women with keen emotional intelligence. They bring to the movement the understanding that, 1, climate change disproportionately impacts women, especially in rural and Indigenous communities. 2, there's a threat multiplier that climate change exacerbates existing gender inequalities, such as increasing gender-based violence. For example, there is a 28% increase in femicide during heat waves. And third, did you know that the highest rates of murdered and missing Indigenous women occur near extractive sites?
Granddaughter, say slow down, keep it in the ground.
So here's another piece of the sexist puzzle. Euronews reports that in Europe, women hovering on the brink of power face a social media nightmare which threatens to destroy everything, and that is sexist abuse and personal attacks. The media calls it system justification. That is, old boys who will destroy other people to keep up the old boys network and the old boys money. These old and young boys defend and justify the existing safe and supportive systems, even when these systems are disastrous to the rest of society. Surveys of politically active people in Europe, women gaining power in any way or party, are targeted more often and more sexually. 2/3 experience women-hating attacks, and 22% of these women have considered pulling out of politics altogether. The hostility young women face online still discourages many from speaking out or entering politics in the first place. So what can we do in reaction? Well, mentoring is one thing. We need to give each other and women the chutzpah. We all need to keep being brave and effective, and that's mentoring. We must share aggressively with whoever we can learn from and whoever can learn from us. So that's my number one message: mentoring and succession planning. We need more women functioning at the very top of their game. And you can help us overcome historical disadvantage and influence the next wave of climate leadership. Indigenous women were historically the leaders in their communities until colonization and before the many sordid attempts at genocide. The Federal Indian Act stripped them of all their rights and powers. They were denied many treaty and sacred human rights in the hundreds of years of sexual terrorism. The history of Indigenous women is a massive story, but here are 3 glimpses into what they are capable of doing. As well as women, there's this wonderful phenomenon of 12-year-old girls, both Indigenous and not, stepping up to the climate fight with brains and courage and the support of their community. So just to name a few of these girls. The Brookings Institute, which is the most quoted think tank in the U.S., published an article entitled "Why Captain Planet Should Have Been a Woman." This article states that the very best thing climate leaders and advocates can do is commit to raising women's status by investing in girls' education, especially negotiations and climate decision-making. Pretty interesting. This is something we could do for all the girls, and Indigenous girls specifically, offer training and resources in climate negotiations and decision-making. And we could ask Indigenous women and girls for lessons in how to break away from the psychological security of low stress, low risk actions, and take responsibility as elders and get into some direct action. Here are a few things that suffragists did to win the vote for women, and the situation wasn't as dire as it is now. They held illegal demonstrations. They had hunger strikes. They attacked churches. They burned politicians on occupied homes. They ruined golf courses and male-only clubs. They changed themselves to buildings. They planted bombs and they handcuffed themselves to railings. In terms of direct action, some women in SCAN are focusing our energies on action. We're starting to take our lead from the heroic women in Canada and around the world who have put everything they have on the line. I would like to resurrect the reading group we used to have in SCAN to talk to one another about nonviolent direct action. We should learn about what our options are, even for a few people who might like to help set some new standards. And we're not talking about getting arrested, but we could talk about stepping out of our comfort zone and being more dramatic, and this for the few people only who feel like being in the vanguard. I'm speaking personally here. This is a personal invitation to the few people who might enjoy exploring this idea. Finally, the action I want to announce is a sex strike. We are calling upon people of goodwill in SCAN and elsewhere to refuse to have sex with any executive of the Royal Bank of Canada or any of the other lending institutions or, CPPIB until they get out of fossil fuels and stop funding any kind of fossil fuels. So no sex with any of them. Just say no.